Hello and welcome to Builders, the podcast where we explore the journeys of the people shaping the future of tech. I'm your host, Lee Haynes, and today I'm joined by Jacopo Himberg, Director of Data at Wolt. Jacopo has been with Wolt for nearly 9 years, joining when it was a small startup and helping grow it into a global tech company known for its hyperlocal delivery model and rapid expansion. Founded in Helsinki, Finland, back in 2014, Wolt started as a local food delivery app and has since evolved into a full-scale logistics platform operating in over 20 countries. In 2021, it joined forces with DoorDash in one of the largest European tech acquisitions to date. Today, we'll dive into Jacopo's career journey, the evolution of Wolt's data infrastructure, the challenges of scaling data teams, and what it takes to build a lasting data culture in a high-growth environment. So, we've lots to talk about. Let's get into it. Jacopo, welcome to Builders. Great to have you here.
Thank you, Lee. I'm happy to be on the podcast.
Really nice to have you here. Let's start with your career path. Can you walk us through how you got into data and how you ended up at Wolt?
That's a brilliant way to start. I never really planned to work in tech. I think it was around 2010 when I was in Milan. I was 4 years into law school, and at some point I just ran out of enthusiasm. I think that's a good way to put it. And one morning I woke up thinking that this isn't for me anymore, and I packed a suitcase, booked a ticket to Finland. Finland is my home country. I was born there, and decided to see what would happen. Wasn't really thinking through that choice, but that's what happened. I've been a hobby programmer since the days of the dial-up internet. My parents had. I remember when they brought internet home, it became some sort of gateway to the rest of the world. I remember using a TeamSpeak or being on forums and doing some small web projects and enjoying that early internet magic. But I never saw it as a career path. This is programming because nobody around me ever did. And going back to me hopping over to Finland, before I arrived, I applied to several jobs trying to find, of course, something to do. And one consulting company decided to roll the dice on me. And what ended up happening is that that led to starting a career in consulting and working at different companies, and a couple of those quite big, like Nokia. And after Nokia got acquired by Microsoft. And I was suddenly in the room with brilliant people solving data problems. Mostly, we worked with data teams there, and it just clicked. It felt natural, and I felt some sort of sense of belonging with the discipline and with the technology. And then, if we fast forward to 2015, I was using Wolt as a early user. And one day I just happened to leave a comment in their public Facebook group, something like, hey, could you make the app smarter somehow, add ratings, a bit of personalization, and integrate data from different sources. And I didn't really think much about it. But the co-founder, one of the co-founders, Oskari, replied to me, oh, great ideas, you should consider applying. Of course, the timing was really terrible. I just bought my first flat, and I really didn't think like it would be wise. But then in the weeks and months that followed, it sort of didn't leave me alone at this interaction. And then I pulled the pin. I got uncomfortable, decided to interview. It was an interesting process. I think at some point I was sitting in the room with 4 or 5 people, the founders, and somewhat we clicked. And then in April 2016, I joined, and my journey really in data began turning to being more of some sort of a happy accident to being like a conscious, deliberate choice of doing this professionally and trying to apply all I learned, and got exposed to in the past, including parts of what I learned at the university in law school, because privacy and all these legal aspects became super important shortly after, with the advent of GDPR and all these regulations.
Wow, what a story from kind of changing direction in terms of law school to data, but also how you actually ended up at Volt. They must have seen something in those comments, right? Like, this guy knows what he's talking about. We've got to get him on board. So you've been there for almost 9 years now, right? What was it like in those early days? How has the company and your role in it evolved over time?
Yeah. Back in the day, when I joined, I think we were less than 30 people in total. And in the product and engineering organization where I belonged, or you can call it organization, but in reality, we were like, maybe 6 of us working around, 6 desks, having coffee, spending long days, having lunch together. We were all in our maybe mid-20s, with a few seasoned folks in other functions. That's it. That was the whole company. And we knew, though, we were building something that had to scale in case it would be successful because of the type of business we were building. So we generally really refused these sort of cheap shortcuts you take when you're small, even if the company was far from certain to be successful. Today, we are over 14,000 people at the Volt, just at Volt.
Wow.
Yet the place still feels relatively flat. I can get pinged by different sides of the organizations into Slack, or summoned into conversations on Hangouts, and I can do the same in return. There is the same feeling of being in a room with those 6 people in some way. Of course, the big difference is that you do healthier hours, and you have way more support structures and people around you that can help you get things done. Basically, the same energy, just distributed way better, and giving you the opportunity to also focus on other aspects of your life. Thankfully,
really, really, really cool that they've been able to, or you guys have been able to keep that culture or that feeling when expanding to such. Yeah, you mentioned 14,000 just in Volt.
Yeah, many people ask. I don't know exactly what's the formula. However, it just happened.
Yeah. And to talk a little bit, because obviously you're director of data, you've been leading kind of building the data infrastructure there for it at Volt, right? So, what were some of the early challenges you faced in building out Volt's data infrastructure?
Well, the challenge is, I think, the biggest challenge is that we have always been quite short-handed in some way, like a tiny headcount, huge expectations, and as I mentioned earlier, we sort of knew that if we would survive those early years, things would eventually get big quite quickly. So on the data side, we really had to design for that. Basically, two things were important. That first, think about building systems that require minimum maintenance. Like, you don't really want heavy operations in your data environment when you are at any size, small or big. But definitely when you are small and you are thinking about, okay, how about there are 3 times more people in the company and I still need to run this.
Yeah.
how do I do it? And then you do it by creating a system that sort of doesn't page you at night or doesn't break under load and so on. Just to give you some an example, I think in 2019 or 2020, we faced a challenge to we started to scale. Our product teams started to be relatively big in size, and we started to lose the connection with the engineering organization, maybe because the speed just increased so much. You could just be in every conversation, right? And that means that our services sprawled, our data storage sprawled, and we started to have new features coming online all the time, new data showing up, and in data teams, one of the main jobs is to make that data available for usage in analytical context to the rest of the business. And for us, that meant that we had to transfer this data, take this data from place A and put it in place B. And at that point, we went through a couple of weeks of design and a couple of weeks implementation, and we built our Kafka-based data ingestion layer responsible for taking this data from the services and syncing it into our Snowflake data warehouse. And this project was built in a couple of weeks, and it still today moves data from hundreds of databases at a very predictable cost into our warehouse. And it's a very simple project in a way. That's an example of building something that has quite a big return on investment. And we tend to think about things in similarly, like how do we work for a few weeks, a month maybe, and deliver something that, if untouched, can still work.
Yeah.
And we have been also very strictly opinionated from the very beginning. I think one thing that we realized is that looking at other data environments, you do see a lot of freedom, especially for data user from the data user perspective, to create data assets and massage data with SQL in the way they want, maybe outside of version control and stuff like that. We did go the opposite direction. We said, look, everything needs to be documented, everything needs to be version controlled, everything needs to be going into production in like a software engineer would do. Right? You commit the code, you have some sort of build pipeline, you publish, and your author data sets out, and that really helped there.
And this was like a conscious decision that you made like very, very early on, or because I'm thinking, Volt obviously it starts out as this food delivery app, right? Which but now it's just like I mentioned before, it's this technology enabled logistics network, you could say, where it's gone into a wide range of products and across different categories, and it's on demand. So it's more like, did that have to shift the demands of the data systems? Did you have to rethink or rebuild, or did you make this kind of conscious decision very early on regardless?
We made that decision very early on because we saw that I think already when I joined, there was the push for example, becoming a very good delivery player, right? We didn't want to be limited to takeaway in some neighborhood, right? So we wanted to do delivery. We wanted to do delivery, and scaling delivery is a massive operation. Like, you need to get a lot of things right, and you need to get the visibility over the data right. You need to get reliable data. You need to and you need to keep the data reliable over time. So at that point, we went for full data certainty. So the authorship workflow of the data, the way people publish assets, the way people approach to telling others what's in a table or documenting columns and stuff like that. We took the software engineering approach. But it was great because today in our warehouse, we still have, I think, around 2,000 tables maximum. Well, in some data environments, you see that the people have hundreds of thousands of tables because everybody can create whatever they want. And then as you grow, this mass of data causes information uncertainty. You don't know what's important and what's not. And then you need to start to post hoc do sort of cataloging, asset cataloging, bring in the metadata, tell if this is a bronze table or gold table and so on. We skirted that a little bit by being a bit proactive there. I think it had to do with our headcount. We were tiny and we didn't want to hire a lot of people there. So we had to be smart somehow.
And in terms of, as you've kind of expanded, not just like the product range, you could say, but also across markets, diverse kind of markets. I can only imagine that factors such as localization, also regulations, have played a much bigger role as well, right? So how has your kind of data strategy evolved in that sense?
I think our data strategy remained pretty similar all in all. As I said, we knew that we had to really keep the data environment clean in a way. And what we ended up doing is, as we scaled, we applied a similar approach globally. So we don't sort of have for instance, from regulation standpoint, we don't sort of treat data originating from one market differently than data originating from another market. We allow the same restrictions everywhere. We apply the same restrictions everywhere, for instance, and we have thought about this from the very beginning. I think it's important that the core it was important to identify these core principles earlier. Like I mentioned that we were thinking about the scaling the technology aspect to keep our operations very lean, but we also thought about governance very early, thinking like how people identify what's sensitive and what's not sensitive, right? Regardless of the geography and so on, we have one global layer that tells us the sensitivity of a data asset or data column. And there are also other aspects, like we wanted to evolve the environment in a direction where there are not so many, the choices of tools is not so wide. So we don't have that many tools to access data. We don't have that many deep tools in some way for data engineers to work. We went for a direction where we wanted to have a strong self-service to ensure scaling. So all those aspects were there from the beginning. Of course, what changed is that the company, the professionals within the company that use data changed a little bit in profile. So we had to adapt our tooling choice a little bit, and we had to adapt also how we do self-service, because if back in the day we could get by maybe being very heavy on Python and thinking that most of the people can contribute to that type of projects. Nowadays, we are to maintain the same velocity, we need to simplify the tooling. So the principles stay the same, right? Tight governance, not expand the tooling choice, and try to find a lean self-service.
And when you say self-service in this context, what do you mean exactly? Is it more kind of enabling non-engineering users to access and work with the data, or what?
If you think about the data, that's an excellent question. If you think about the data workflow, you have different personas working in your data environment, and all have different needs. There are some people connected to the data environment who need to publish their data. They run a service, and they might want to run an A/B test or some type of study, or just to do business reporting because that feature is new or whatnot. And they have some people interested on the other side to consult this data and query it, so that they want to publish data. So, but they also do other stuff in their day-to-day. So if this publishing workflow is very clumsy and cumbersome, and it's something that you have to interact with maybe once a year or twice a year, remembering how that workflow works is impossible. So basically, you need to onboard yourself every time you do it from scratch. And if that's a very technology heavy project, if it's very technical, if it requires a lot of stuff that might need to be installed on your laptop, like libraries, or if the project evolves very, very fast, you might just end up not wanting to do it and delegating that to a data operations team or some sort. Like, this is the setup that we used to end up at some point at Wolt, where we saw that the gap between the time and not necessarily the skill, but the time that these producers had and the technical setup was too hard, was too big. So we had to sort of go and simplify a lot to the point where we even removed the need of knowing or knowing how to write code there. So we built a declarative interface, abstracted all the technology behind, and people can do self-service now because they go to a repository that's of a project that is one command to install. It doesn't have that many dependencies. You can go and you can say, my intent is to take data from place A and put it in place B. Here is how the data looks like. Could you do it for me? And then you publish a pull request, and it goes through some standard checks, someone approves it and gets released and stuff starts working. And if you need to do some operations, you have a predictable CLI. And that is just one piece of the workflow, right? So then people want to do SQL authoring, they want to do metrics, they want to do other stuff. We expanded self-service in the past couple of years in this way that people sort of interact with this one thing. You can call it a control plane for data. We call it internally Pretzel, this product that we built internally for data authoring. And it works in the same way. It's the same project, regardless of what you need to do. Behind the scenes, there is a lot of tech, but for our end users, it's the same thing. So they could even start the day by doing an integration, then updating some derived data set and doing a metric update in the same sort of session without having to go to a Python heavy project and go and code something in I don't know, in Kotlin or Java or some other programming language to do a specific bit of the workflow. And then so it really helps people to interact better with each other's. So this self-service, very well taught through self-service, but it also helps people gradually learn more things, adjacent to theirs. So maybe they can go a bit, they can transverse the stack a little bit more autonomously. So that's how we think about self-service at the moment. Yeah.
Nice. And at a broader level, now, obviously, the data platform space is like really evolved, and tools like you mentioned Snowflake before, Databricks, Airflow, loads more. They're kind of shaping these modern data stacks, you could say. What trends or shifts are you seeing in the data platform landscape, and how do you think teams should be thinking about tooling and architecture choices today?
Yeah, I think this builds pretty much on my previous answer or train of thought. From my perspective, there is a lot of technology out there, so things are evolving super fast. And I think at the end of the day, what this tech enables you to do is it should enable you to create an environment where you can help the business grow faster. That means building products that are more data-driven, or building visibility over problems in the business through the expression of metrics and of sorts. What is important is to remember that the technology is here to facilitate this process. The technology is not the process. No. So what we tend to think nowadays is that we need to understand how we want to expose technology to people. And oftentimes this results us in actually not exposing the technology at all by building some abstraction that can survive over technology changes. For instance, in in my time at Wolt in the past 10 years, and when I was a consultant, there has been a shift, a big shift in the data warehousing space, where you went from using enterprise software, maybe Oracle, Informatica, to then an early pass at data lakes, then back into this sort of Snowflake, Redshift, BigQuery world, and then now back to the data lake somehow. So all of this is a recipe for a disaster from if you expose these technologies or these tools directly to your data users. So what ends up happening is that you end up basically running a migration shop, because you are going to chase these capabilities, you are going to chase these opportunities in some way, but your users also need to adapt constantly. Your users are not interested in any of this. Your users are just interested in getting the data that they need.
Exactly, yeah.
All right. So, okay, what do? Then you put the BI tool in front, but then can the BI tool keep up? You don't know. So I think at the end of the day, it's about it should be about you trying to think how you minimize, how you can keep lean and low overhead the replacement of the technology behind the scenes by giving an interface that's stable and well thought through to your users. It might mean that you need to create tools and technologies that allow you to recreate those data assets easily without changing the interface that the users have to those materializations. But it also might mean that you cannot tie yourself to a specific, very tightly to a specific vendor. You need to think like, what's the abstraction in between the user and the technology? Basically, that's how we see it evolving today. And our data control plane is, in a way, a reaction to that. We want to be able to tell the user, the important thing is what you intend to do. How we generate the execution plan for what you intend to do and where we run the compute and where we store the data is our problem. We'll make it available to you afterwards. Yeah. I think the industry is going to go in that trend a little bit.
It's super interesting because I saw that you wrote a piece on Volt's blog as well about the importance of data platforms. I think it was more generally, and I think that was my interpretation. My summary was that it was Volt's data platforms kind of designed not just to centralize information, but to empower the teams right across the organization to use that data confidently, consistently, but also independently, right? You were talking about self-service and everything. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, and at the end of the day, maybe to try to get my thoughts somehow to a conclusion in that space. Like every decision lives on data in a company at the end of the day, right? So if your platform or your data is shaky, people stop trusting the numbers and start to fly blind and start to do their own thing. We're very conscious of that. So you want to maintain you want to express a data environment that's very safe in a way that people feel confident to use. And of course, every company is a little different. So you need to, at the end of the day, express it in a different way in different companies. This getting to data certainty in some way. But for us, going through this journey of being very disciplined and reacting through abstractions to this sprawling complexity was the right choice. We had the time to do it. We had the right people that thought about the data environment in this way, and we had the support from the stakeholders around us. But there is a cost to doing this early, and there is a cost to retrofit.
Yeah.
So retrofitting is complicated. We are seeing it today when we had to change things in the data workflow that we didn't get really right. there's a huge human cost when the company is very big, right?
And how do you go? How do you even go about that? Really, at like in a company at like Volt scale.
Yeah, it's you are summoning these sort of words like migrations and such, which are curse words in a way in our company, and also probably in every other company, right? When you have established patterns, changing patterns is very difficult. So it's a very, very costly exercise. For instance, I can give you an example. Right now, we are introducing a brand new, we call it a data layer. Data layer for us is a representation of, let's say, a way to process and publish and author data in a specific for a specific scope, right? So we have maybe an integration layer where we take the data in for integrations. That the layer has certain qualities and expectations, and then sort of as you refine the data and go all the way to the metrics, that is where you want people to work. But right now we are rebuilding our data model. We have been rebuilding it for a year or so. We go from a model that's more like that had a lot of freedom to a model where we are more opinionated. We have facts and dimensions. It's sort of classic enterprise data model. And taking that data model into use is super complicated because we have maybe several thousands of users using our data every day through two tools, maybe the Snowflake data interface and the RBI tool Looker. And we made a small design mistake there at the very beginning where we exposed that data directly. So now having this model is radically different and we want to roll it out. So what is the value proposition? How do we sell the story to them? Is non-obvious, and we are sort of trying very hard to not to have to keep this legacy that we had for 10 years in the system just because we have a few core users that don't want to migrate and learn new things. But we use you can start leveraging these new features that are available in the machine learning space. For example, these large language models and AI to possibly allow people to get familiar or socialize with these new data sets in some way that replace other data sets. So that's maybe one avenue that we have been investigating, right? Giving people a place where to go and ask questions like, what is the data set that is more suitable for doing this type of research or this type of study compared to this other data set that I have been using for a long time. I think we want to see something like this as part of this migration effort. And if people get on board with this and get comfortable asking questions like these to our assistant tools, I think it's going to be a bit less painful than having to go and just brutally remove the table from your role, and then you are left paging us, asking like, "What happened to my data?" Right? You don't. That's what you don't want. Ideally, in our interface, we would tell you you're making a query that's a bit shady, right? Because you're using this table we want to deprecate. How about we give you this table instead? But for some reason, no vendor like Snowflake has really thought about this.
Right. Right. I think that'd be super helpful, wouldn't it? It'd be really helpful.
You would think that this would be obvious. Right?
It has to happen at some point, surely. Yeah. I mean, in the age of AI and these LLMs and everything. But that was going to be my next question as well. Actually, what role do automation and AI play today in like Volt's data ecosystem?
I want to take that question and expand a little bit. Maybe Automation has been very standard at Wolt for like a decade. Almost nothing is really manual. We don't like to have very sort of heavy manual operations in some way, and we try to keep it that way pretty much in every project, not just in the data space but everywhere else. Manual processes pop up often still for new use cases. Let's say we launch a new business line, we try to leverage some technology we built to solve a different problem. So there might be some of that. But then as we mature the concept and the product, and then these manual steps that people might be doing get replaced by automation. And when it comes to AI, I think the way we are looking at AI, at least in the data space, and perhaps in some of our product and operations areas, is as a developer productivity enhancer above all. And as I mentioned earlier, also knowledge access gateway in some form. On the data side, for instance, we've been experimenting with the latest editors like Cursor, and the MCPs. For instance, we have developed a chat interface for this product Pretzel that I mentioned earlier, that was able to answer your questions, wide range of questions. Not give you data back, but give you pointers, as in how do you install this project, for example, if you are a developer, or how do you get some certain type of work done, but also what kind of table can I use to query or get answers to this type of problem. So that type of questions. But then when we start to look at the developer workflow, we thought like it's kind of cumbersome to send people to this different web page to answer questions and get help. How about we bring it to the editor? And now in Cursor, we can leverage the sort of the backend that we built for this assistant, and ask things like, hey, could you scaffold me an integration? I need to bring data from a new service. This is the service, some metadata about the service, and it can code that integration. So we went from having to code in Python and knowing a very low level how the project worked to just asking leisurely, like, hey, look, I have this service A.
Yeah.
It publishes data into
so
this topic.
You're basically prompting this essentially in like
You
a
can prompt
natural
it, right?
language,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And then what prompting allows you to do is in more complex scenarios, let's say you're editing some, you're authoring, or you're adding maybe a column to a data set somewhere else, like a SQL-based materialization, for example. And all of a sudden you're like, hey, this data set sounds like quite important. I would love to add some quality gates or quality checks, or declare some dependencies so that my dataset doesn't materialize if data is late upstream and so on. How about you just ask it in this way? And that has been quite transformational, at least conceptually. I cannot talk about the usage of this feature yet, but seeing some of the demos that we have prepared, and looking at how the workflow feels like, and how the discovery of things that you expect, let's say, you don't really know how to declare in YAML, but you want to do them. Now you can kind of even try to ask it. And you might get it most of the time right or done, or otherwise you get some documentation back that helps you get what you need done. I think it's also quite fun to see how people might be using these sorts of technologies. I would love to see at some point someone just starting to talk into the chat box in Cursor rather than type it, because that speeds up the interaction so much.
Yeah, absolutely. That's like the next step, right?
That's the next step. Like you want to be very effective. You stop typing, you just start talking, and then see where it gets you. So that's maybe the developer story. I think that will really help also getting people up to speed super fast. And what I would love that people focus less on the technology in the data space and the data engineering space, for instance, and focus more on the business. Because now that they have a lot of time, so instead of really going deep into tools and technologies, they can go deep into the business. They can go and sit closer to product, closer to analytics, or even start to do more of one of the other job. So that's going to be very exciting how that space sort of evolves through this type of approach to doing data more declarative, for example, and through AI helping you get started faster and nail those little difficult things. And for non-technical colleagues, I think AI for us is many things, but what I can talk about is perhaps a more like, and what I'm more excited about is the knowledge management. Because when let's think about the scenario where you get onboarded to a new role or you start at a company. What you want is a strong buddy. Normally you are at the office.
Exactly.
Right? You have someone sitting next to you, and for the first few months you can ask all the silly questions, and you get a lot of free get out of jail cards, no matter how silly your question is. But at some point, it sort of end up in a situation like a remote workplace, right? And all of a sudden, this buddy is not there, and writing on Slack or disturbing or booking a meeting is not really the same interaction you can have in the corridor. But with knowledge management tools, you powered by AI, maybe this changes a little bit, because now your overhead to asking the question is quite low. So you can go there and you can ask whatever you want, like which side of the company is in charge of this type of stuff? Who can I talk to? Or where do I find loyalty data? Or how do I install this project on my machine? And you don't need necessarily to find those people to talk to, but you can surface the knowledge that's more latent.
Exactly. And it's always there.
Yeah, that's always there. Of course, then teams maintaining these types of tools and technologies have a huge responsibility, because if you get the answers wrong, then people stop trusting them and they don't become any useful, right? So we are watching the space really carefully there. We are testing things out, but our approach is that this needs to be a tool, not a source of confusion, and it needs to increase the productivity and not increase the uncertainty overall, right?
Yeah, no, really, really well put. And to talk briefly about hiring in data, because obviously hiring great data engineers can be tough. What are the biggest challenges that you're seeing in today's market?
Well, I think today's market is quite tough, and for a variety of reasons. I think there is something happening in the data space right now where companies are shifting a bit the approach on how they do data. And certainly for us, what's true is that the job market for specific roles doesn't match the offering that's out there. For instance, we stopped, for this very reason, we stopped using, for instance, the data engineer title anywhere. Because when we were hiring for data engineers for our data organization, what most of the market offered us people who are really brilliant at writing SQL and building frameworks around tools that are very SQL heavy, like dbt, for example. But in our organization, the split is more. There is a split between people that work with data and people that enable that data work. And we do hire basically mostly exclusively software engineers on the platform track. We are building a lot of services. They have a affinity to the data work, but that you can learn, right? But it's very difficult to become a very good software engineer that really builds at scale with the good patterns. That's super hard. So we are looking for that type of candidates that are interested a bit in the data space. They might be interested in machine learning and so on, but most of all, they have that attitude and mindset of the software engineer. We do hire also a different profile, like analytics engineers. And these analytics engineers, they are not directly in the data organization, not in my organization, but our idea there is that they help turning the data we have into decision-ready assets or metrics, and sort of they are very close to the analysts. They are very close to the product managers, and they are working on data. But we really had to stop to hire data engineers because that's sort of a tough role, which is sort of in between these two worlds, and we wanted to make this split very clear. And nowadays, you find a lot more people in the market that you start to find people in the market that want to build data platforms in the same way we are thinking about them. But even 2 years ago, this wasn't true. We had a quite a tough time hiring for the platform track, for sure.
It's a super interesting way to do it. But these are still quite, technical profiles, of course. It's a technical role. You can assume that they will be. But beyond technical ability, do you think technical ability is less important in the age of AI? But also beyond technical ability, how do you assess things like communication, adaptability, curiosity, all of these things?
I think when we interview, we do nowadays have a lot of scenario-based questions that we ask candidates. And what these scenario-based questions allow us to do is to get the feeling, does the candidate, the person that we're talking to today, are they curious? And can they adapt? Can they be self-initiated, or can they learn new things, or what is their how do they deal with conflicts, right? So we are trying to find people that can work well in our current situation, but also evolve with us into and be in a different place sort of a few years down the road. But we look for curiosity above all. The tools will change, the technology will change, the company will change. We went through a huge transformation in the past 2-3 years. And, but a curious mind sort of keeps up. If you're curious, if you're self-driven, it really helps. And then we look for people who believe that their best work is ahead of them, who lift the teammates, who get excited when someone else succeeds. The technical chops need to be there. We do have a relatively strict interview process when it comes to technical validation, but generosity, hunger, and willingness to learn and also to teach are aspects that really matter a lot for us in the interview process. The tech being very good technically doesn't get you a spot, basically.
Makes sense. And when it comes to this kind of culture as well, obviously we've been talking about how rapidly Volt's grown, and it's kind of kept this reputation for moving fast as well. How do you maintain that kind of startup mindset while maturing systems and structures?
That's
Are there like any rituals or principles you rely on?
Yeah, well, it's difficult to say. One thing that we try to give people an idea that, or like we try to give people space to express themselves in a way. We want at the end of the day people to have agency and accountability and get freedom to build. We of course are very outcome oriented, but we are trying to give a really like to make sure that people understand that there is a space for them to go and get things done, and we don't want to really put a lot of red tape over how we do things. We are very lean in processes on the data side. We do have a less strict planning cycle at the moment. For instance, we do a lot of continuous planning. We try to reevaluate continuously what we are doing, and the people that are working in our teams have a lot of say in what we are doing. We are trying to also create an environment where people understand where we want to go long term, so that we don't really need to participate to those to all those rituals or meetings where we decide actually what we are going to do to get there. So as long as the mission is very clear and it's exposed to people, then we believe that that creates an environment where people can gradually get more comfortable raising their ideas, and at the end of the day, have in a way less direct guidance over how they put together their projects and so on. Nowadays, though, we need to have some sort of a more strict way to publish our decisions or to draft our proposals. So there is some sort of structure, right? But the structure is there to help us look back in some way and help us give stakeholders some information so it's seen as a positive thing. That's structure. So not structure that we put on the teams because we need the teams to work in a specific way and they don't understand why, right? We put the structure in place, and the structure is helpful for us to get the work done. So it's that's sort of what's happening at the moment. And of course, when you are leading an organization of 40 people, it's very different than when you're working in 6 people. And when those 40 people need to do work for 14,000 people, that's even. I think the scale is really important to expose also to our teams. I think oftentimes people don't realize nowadays that you don't go to the office.
Yeah,
what's
exactly.
the scale? Yeah. What's the amount of people you're actually working to help daily, right?
No, really, really well put. But as I start to wrap up here, Jakcopo, let's zoom out a little bit. For tech and data leaders looking to build and scale their teams, what advice would you give them? Is there any advice that you wish you'd received earlier?
That's an excellent question. I think one advice I would give is to treat data as a first-class citizen from day one. And that sounds somewhat cliche in a way. It's probably one of the most used sentences in the data space ever in the past 10 years. But what I mean is you need to consciously define how you want your data to work. Define how you want to look at the business and build the environment that delivers those insights at the cadence and quality your business needs, and avoid playbooks that are imported from your previous job or other companies. They give maybe a hint of what should work, but they oftentimes fail because they don't know that they don't know really the local modifiers in your business. Your data strategy and the way you approach and scale data teams need to fit into the company's decision-making style. Redoing this later is almost impossible because it requires also changing the mindset of a lot of people, especially in the data team. And this needs to be something that the data organization knows, how people make decisions. So when you hire and bring up to speed your team, you need to give them an idea of where all this is used, how this is used, what are the goals. Because otherwise, especially if you are doing this in a already mid-sized or large company, the data teams or the people that are actually doing the work on the data space, they are often removed from the people who are making decisions. We were lucky because at the very beginning, the team was very small. For a relatively long time, maybe a year, 2 years, we were able to be in that less than 100 people organization and really sit down and look at how we make decisions. And then that is what propelled us, and the decision-making style, it really hasn't changed in the past 10 years too much.
No, it makes sense. And looking ahead, what excites you most about the future of data, whether it's at Volt or in the industry more broadly?
Yeah, I think we touched upon this earlier. And what I'm excited about is that in some areas, we are moving past the debates around technology, and we are moving into decisions. The focus moves into how do we enable decisions. And we are starting to see people more interested in finding or publishing, releasing abstractions over the data environments, like for us, Pretzel is, for example. And I'm excited because gradually teams are steered to thinking in business terms, not in, I said, pipelines or technology details. If we keep going at it, it's going to really, I believe it's going to lead to a completely different way of looking at the data space down the road, and maybe bring it together also other aspects of the data workflow that are seen maybe a bit more distance, like how the machine learning space, for example, or the experimentation space. How do those fit into this whole data environment? And normally they are seen as maybe something else than more foreign than the rest of the data environment that helps to make business decisions. But at the end of the day, those two environments are really very close, more close to the to this central data warehousing or data environment than it seems. But just the tools are too specialized right now. So I expect the industry to shift in a similar direction in the years to come, starting from the large companies, actually, not from the small ones, because the large companies are the ones that have problems with workflow normally. They have the scale, they have the inefficiencies, and then from there, I think there will be a couple of players that might come up with a new, even possibly open source software or approaches, and then we will see that spread across the industry. Technology will become less of a talking point apart from the AI side. I think the AI is still at very, very early stages, and we'll see a lot of work being done there, and we will see sort of some cycles in that field. So I think there it's going to matter more like how do you integrate those technologies into your data stack in a way that you can keep up with the evolution, so you don't bind yourself too closely with maybe one of these vendors, but you are able to leverage whichever company provides the best model, or maybe take some of these models in the house as fast as they possibly become a bit less power hungry. But I'm really excited about where the space is going, and I can't wait to see where the future takes this discipline. In a way, I believe that in the next couple of years will be very exciting, and perhaps will go by much faster than the past 10 went by when it comes to evolution and changes in the space.
Yeah, it's exponential really right now. But before I wrap up now, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
I think we covered quite a lot actually from from how I got into this and where the industry is heading next. So it has been quite a good session, I have to say. A lot of reflections.
Well, Jacopo, it's been a really insightful conversation. From building Volt's early data systems, scaling the global teams, and shaping that data first culture. So, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you again for the opportunity, and see you.
Yeah, thank you. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with a colleague or friend, and leave us a review. Until next time, keep innovating and keep building. Ciao for now.